We are going to be talking about thermochemical equations. These are equations that show how the heat is transferred in a chemical reaction. And we had already talked about that heat energy is enthalpy, and it's denoted by the change in enthalpy. That's the delta sign H, and that's your symbol for enthalpy. The other thing we talked about is we have a delta H that's negative. So we have a negative sign. That is going to be exothermic. And that means the energy is going to be leaving the system or leaving the reaction. On the other hand, if delta H is positive, that's going to be endothermic. And that is where the energy is entering the system. So this is one way to write it with our enthalpy outside of the reaction. But we can also put the enthalpy inside the reaction. When we do that, it doesn't matter what the sign is. We don't use those signs. We need to add it as a reactant or we add it as a product. So if it's exothermic, it's leaving the system, it's coming out at the end, that means that it will be a product. Spell that right. And so I would just add it at the end. Positive 185 kilojoules, okay? On the other hand, if it's endothermic, I need to add it to the system to get the reaction going, so it is going to be a reactant. And so I would put it to start to 28.1 kilojoules is added to this reactant, so it acts like a reactant to make ammonium and nitrate ions. So to review, if it's outside the equation, so if we have this delta H, we will have a positive or negative sign. If it's inside the equation, we know it's exothermic if it is a product and it's on the right side of the equation. Notice we just added to the right side. Or if it's added to the reactant side, it's going to be endothermic because I added it to the reaction to get things going. So now let's look at these two equations right here. First of all, we have this heat is a product. That means it's coming off the system. It's coming out with the products at the end. And so it's exothermic. If I want to take this heat value and put it outside the equation, I write delta H for enthalpy equals, and because it's exothermic, it's a negative 285.8 kilojoules. On the other hand, this reaction has 182 kilojoules as a reactant, okay? And that means I added it to get the reaction to go. Okay, so that means it's endothermic because it was added to the system. And for an endothermic reaction, I write delta H as a positive, and this happens to be 182 kilojoules. So if it is on the reactant side, anywhere on the reactant side, it's an endothermic reaction, and it is a positive 182 kilojoules. If it is on the product side, that means energy is coming off of the reaction and it's exothermic and our delta H is negative.